First of all, we'll talk about the catalogs. I've got a few in here. These are reproduction catalogs of the time. This one happens to be Bloomingdale's 1886. What's good about catalogs is that you get the rather unvarnished. It's a primary resource of what they looked like, what size they were, which, by the way, corsets were a lot larger than you've been led to believe, and the price, and what else was worn with them. The shoes, the stockings, the chemises, the drawers. You don't have to guess. You don't have to rely on anybody else's opinion. Here it was for sale. Corsets, A Visual History by R.L. Shep. This is all primary reference material, and it's all underwear corsets. So if you want to get an idea from the early time to when corsets were left off of what was actually published, this is where you can go. Once again, primary reference material gathered from many sources and put into this book. Great book. Corsets and Crinolines by Nora Waugh, obviously a classic. This one doesn't only go into corsets, but the other underwear items that went with it. The hoop skirts, the bustles, the bust pads, everything that you can imagine. Plus she gives, it's quite a technical book too. She gives diagrams of patterns, and she gives quotes of people speaking at the time, so you can get a sense of how they felt about their clothing. This is Harper's Bazaar, 1867 to 1898. This is a fashion magazine. There's not that many corsets in it, but the ones that are there are great, and you can see the fashions that were worn over them in the same context. Here's another illustrated catalog. This one happens to be Jordan Marsh. There's a Montgomery Ward and a Sears catalog as well available. They're all good. Here's Masterpieces of Women's Costume. This is a great book because it shows the underwear, complete shoes and stockings, alongside the fashion that was worn over it. So you can see what was in support of the fashion silhouette at the time. Period Costume for Stage and Screen by Jean Honeysett. A great book, very technical. She not only gives patterns, but also construction techniques and tips. And you can see it's well used by me. It's a very practical book, very usable. I like this book a great deal, even though it really hasn't got much to do with corsets per se, 19th century. Remember I talked about corset history? This book documents that drastic change from the aristocratic fashion to the more common man fashion of the empire. And there are some 18th century corsets in here that are fabulous. Real, these are existing photographs of existing corsets, and it's extremely interesting. And there's one in there of an 1820 corset too that's very, very good. Support and Seduction. This is translated from the French. It's a very entertaining book, and it goes from corsetry of the 18th century to modern underwear. And it has a lot to offer. It's very entertaining. It's translated from the French, as I said. Now this gets a red star. The Corset, A Cultural History by Valerie Steele. This is a great book. If you only read one book about corsets, this would be the one. For one thing, it's only about corsets. She doesn't go into any other types of underwear. And it is a cultural perspective. It's not a technical book per se. But she takes on all the myths and of the supposed misuses of the corset. And she talks about the sexual attraction. In other words, how this garment related to women's place in life. It's a very scholarly book, and I really enjoyed reading it. This is a fabulous book. There's that Christian Lacroix corset on the back, and you can see it laces closed. It's too big for her. Here's The Cut of Woman's Clothes by Nora Waugh, obviously a classic. And there are some corset patterns in here as well as patterns for fashions all the way from 1600 to 1930. fact, on the back, if you look at the jacket cover, it's too small for you to see, but there's a little corset pattern right there on the back. And it's a bust-gore corset that is quite similar to this one, and it's dated 1837, I believe. Here's the History of Underclothes by C. Willett and Phyllis Cunnington. This is one of the first and still a really great book. They focus on underwear, men and women, so that's very interesting. And they show a lot of pictures of existing garments, real garments, not just drawings. Underwear, The Fashion History by Allison Carter. This is an entertaining book, and it has a lot on corsets, but mainly it's a fashion history, and it comes all the way to the present day. Wasted Efforts, another great book by Robert Doyle. I've mentioned it a couple times that it's the only place I found the documenting of flossing. It's a very technical book. He gives you instructions how to make your own and fit your own corsets if you don't want to use a pattern. And he's got more corset diagrams in here of different types of corsets than I've ever seen anywhere. This is a very good book. So that's all I have for you. I hope you've learned what you wanted to learn and that you can go and build your own corsets. A lot of my students have gone into the business of building corsets for others, and that tickles me no end. So I always tease at the end of my workshop and say, now you know, go forth and corset. Thank you very much.